After weeks caring for my dying sister, I returned home to change locks. My daughter-in-law, Serena, opened the door with a cold smile, announcing my move to a nursing home. My son, Michael, just nodded. I'd given them my life savings for that house. I simply laughed. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. This is my story. Like, share, and tell me where you were listening from. The drive home was supposed to be a reprieve, a chance to finally breathe after weeks spent watching my sister, Laura, slip away. The hospital air, thick with antiseptic and sorrow, had clung to my clothes, my hair, even my very soul. Laura's passing had left a hollow ache, a profound emptiness that only the familiar comfort of my own home could begin to soothe. I pictured the worn armchair by the window, my small collection of ceramic birds, the scent of fresh coffee. Simple things, but they represented solace. As I pulled into the driveway, a strange unease flickered. The porch light, usually left on, was off. The familiar green door, which I had walked through countless times, seemed alien. I fumbled for my keys, the weight of grief heavy in my hand, but the key simply wouldn't turn. It didn't fit. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. Had I picked up the wrong set? No, this was my house key, my old house key. Before I could process the growing panic, the door swung open. Serena stood there, my daughter-in-law, a tight, artificial smile on her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair framed a face devoid of warmth. "Eleanor," she said, her voice cool and detached, as if addressing a stranger, "we need to talk." My stomach dropped. I glanced past her, searching for Michael, for some semblance of familiarity. He emerged from the living room, his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed somewhere over my left shoulder. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. Serena stepped aside, allowing me a glimpse into what had once been my entryway. Everything was different. The antique console table I'd cherished was gone, replaced by a sleek, minimalist bench. The framed photographs of our family, Michael as a boy, Laura and me laughing on a beach, my late husband, Thomas, were conspicuously absent. "We've decided it's time for a change," Serena announced, her tone eerily calm. "We've found a lovely assisted living facility for you. It's quite nice, lots of activities. You'll be much happier there." A laugh escaped me, a sharp, disbelieving sound that felt foreign even to my own ears. It was a laugh born of shock, of a pain so sudden and profound it bordered on the absurd. "All right, dear," I managed, my voice strained, trying to mask the seismic shift happening within me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of her words, of Michael's silence, of the stark reality that was unfolding before me. I stepped inside, my feet heavy, forcing myself to look around. The walls, once painted a soft cream, were now a harsh gray. Modern, geometric art hung where my beloved watercolors had been. It was as if every trace of me had been systematically erased. "We really need our own space, Eleanor," Serena continued, oblivious or uncaring of my quiet devastation. "Michael and I are hoping to start a family soon, and, well, we just don't need a live-in mother-in-law anymore. It's time for you to have your own independence." Independence, the word twisted in my gut. I turned to Michael, my voice trembling now, unable to hold back the rising tide of indignation. "Michael, do you remember this house? The one I sold? The one I gave you $48,000 for the down payment?" My voice cracked. "My home, my life savings." Serena scoffed, a dismissive wave of her hand. "Eleanor, that was 4 years ago. We've given you free housing since then. Provided for you. We're more than even. Besides, that money was an investment in Michael's future, not a lifetime lease." My son, Michael, finally spoke, his gaze still fixed on some invisible point beyond me. "Your things are packed, Mom, in the garage. We've arranged for a storage unit for 30 days. You can pick them up when you're ready." The finality in his voice was a physical blow. Packed. In the garage. My life reduced to boxes, relegated to an afterthought. Overwhelmed, numb, I simply turned and walked towards the garage. The door clicked open, revealing a wall of cardboard boxes, each one labeled in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. I recognized a few titles on the spines of my books, a corner of my favorite quilt peeking out. I reached for the nearest box, a small one that felt light in my hands, containing what I didn't know, and simply carried it out to my car. I didn't look back at them. Couldn't. The engine hummed to life, a quiet roar of protest against the silence of my despair. As I drove away from the house that was no longer mine, tears finally began to stream down my face, hot and relentless. They blurred the street lights, turning them into streaks of neon agony. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from Serena. Storage unit info attached. You have 30 days to clear it out. No polite closing, no feigned concern, just a cold, transactional directive. My mind reeled, tumbling through decades of memories. Michael, my boy. I remembered working 2 jobs after Thomas died, cleaning offices late into the night, my back aching just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. I remembered selling my mother's delicate emerald necklace, a cherished heirloom, to pay for his college application fees, to give him a chance at a life I'd never had. Every sacrifice, every quiet struggle had been for him. Serena had always been different. From the moment Michael introduced us, her eyes had held a subtle judgment, a cold appraisal. She'd tolerated me at first, perhaps for the down payment I'd offered, but over the years, the tolerance had curdled into something colder, something possessive. I became their live-in housekeeper, their personal cook, their unpaid errand runner. My suggestions became interruptions, my presence an inconvenience. I had slowly, subtly become a burden. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow as I drove aimlessly. They hadn't just been using me. They had been waiting for Laura to die, for me to be utterly alone, emotionally vulnerable, to make their move. My sister's death had been their cue, the perfect moment to discard me, without family to intervene. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I found a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, its neon sign flickering like a dying ember. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. I lay on the worn bed, the small box clutched to my chest, my body trembling with exhaustion and a profound, bone-deep defeat. Sleep, when it finally came, was a dark, heavy blanket, pulling me down into a void of despair. I awoke to the chilling silence of the cheap motel room. My eyes fluttered open, struggling against the heavy lids, and I saw the digital clock on the bedside table glow. 3:47 a.m. The number seemed to mock me, a stark reminder of the hours I'd spent tossing and turning, caught in the suffocating grip of despair. Every joint ached, every muscle protested the uncomfortable bed, but it was the ache in my soul that truly weighed me down. I dragged myself to the bathroom, flipping on the harsh fluorescent light. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger, an old, worn woman, her eyes puffy and bloodshot, lines etched deep around her mouth, not from laughter, but from worry and sorrow. My hair, usually kept neat, was a tangled mess. This wasn't me. This was a defeated version of Eleanor, one I barely recognized. I turned away from the stark image, the humiliation and abandonment still fresh, a raw wound. My gaze fell upon the single cardboard box I'd salvaged from the wreckage of my former life. It sat on the worn carpet, an unassuming brown rectangle containing the sum total of my physical rebellion. With a sigh that felt like it carried the weight of years, I knelt and untaped the flaps. Inside, a haphazard collection of items. A faded soft wool sweater, one I'd loved for its comfort. A couple of well-worn paperbacks, their pages dog-eared from countless readings. My small, ornate jewelry box, given to me by my mother, holding a few sentimental pieces, mostly costume jewelry now. And beneath those, tucked away, a jumble of old papers, utility bills, old tax returns, things I hadn't thought to organize in ages. A wave of profound sadness washed over me. This was it. This meager collection represented everything I had managed to hold on to. As I began to mindlessly sift through the loose papers, my fingers brushed against something stiff at the very bottom of the box. I pulled it out. It was a large, sturdy yellow envelope, its surface slightly crinkled, with "House documents important" scrawled across it in my own familiar handwriting. I stared at it, utterly confused. Why would this be in this box? I hadn't seen this envelope in years, certainly not since I'd added Michael to the deed. I remembered tucking it away in my old desk, convinced it was safe. It seemed Serena and Michael had been thorough, but not thorough enough to check the contents of every random box they dumped into the garage. Or perhaps they assumed it was just old, irrelevant papers. With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope. Inside, a stack of official-looking documents. My tired brain, still clouded by grief and shock, struggled to process the legal jargon, the dense paragraphs filled with clauses and subclauses. My eyes scanned for familiar words, for anything that could explain why these documents were here, with me, now. And then I saw it, the bold, undeniable heading, Deed of Property. My heart gave a lurch. Below it, in clear, unambiguous print, was the address of the house Michael and Serena were now living in. And then, the names. My name. Eleanor Clark, clearly listed as the primary owner. A memory flickered, faint at first, then sharp and clear. 2 years ago, I'd started thinking about estate planning. I wanted to make things easier for Michael, to avoid probate, should anything happen to me. My lawyer at the time had suggested adding Michael to the deed as a joint owner, specifically joint tenants with right of survivorship, a common way to transfer property upon death without a lengthy legal process. I remembered signing the papers, making sure all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. What I hadn't done, what I hadn't even considered, was removing my own name. Why would I? It was my house. My eyes raced further down the document, my breath catching in my throat. There, in precise legal language, it detailed the ownership percentages. Eleanor Clark, 70%. Michael Clark, 30%, 70%. I was still the majority owner. A small, hard smile, devoid of humor, slowly spread across my face. It felt alien yet strangely satisfying. They thought they had won. They thought they had simply cast me aside, a forgotten relic of their past, easily replaced. They had changed the locks, changed the decor, changed my life. But they had overlooked this crucial, undeniable detail. They were living in my house. The implications began to crash over me, a tidal wave of realization washing away the defeat. They couldn't legally kick me out. They couldn't sell the house without my signature. They couldn't even keep the locks changed without my consent. This wasn't their house. It was our house, and I was the senior partner. The legal weight of that revelation hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath, but this time, it was a blow of empowerment, not despair. The tears that had been flowing so freely earlier dried up, replaced by a searing clarity. I had work to do. My first step, a critical one, was to find a good lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one who specialized in property law. Someone who understood the intricacies of family disputes, who could fight for what was rightfully mine. "You don't throw away the woman who gave you everything," I whispered into the empty motel room, my voice rough but imbued with a newfound steel. Not without consequences. The rest of the night was spent in a hyper-focused trance, reviewing every page of the deed and the accompanying documents. The papers detailed the original purchase date, nearly 30 years ago, and the full purchase price. It even had the satisfaction of mortgage document, confirming I had meticulously paid off the entire loan over 13 years. My name was on every significant piece of paper, my financial contributions meticulously recorded, indisputable. 70%. Michael's 30% was a gift, a gesture of love and foresight, not a transfer of ultimate ownership. It was irrefutable. Eleanor Clark was still the majority owner of that house. As dawn began to paint the sky, a faint gray outside my window, I made a silent vow. This wasn't just about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-respect, and showing Michael and Serena the true meaning of consequences. My determination solidified, a cold, hard stone in my chest. The game had changed. The stale scent of cigarette smoke still clung to my clothes, a lingering reminder of the dismal motel room. By 6 a.m., I was seated in a booth at a brightly lit, overly cheerful diner, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. My hair was combed, my best, albeit slightly wrinkled, blouse was on, and I had managed to apply a touch of lipstick. I needed to project an image of composure, of strength, even if my insides felt like a raw, exposed nerve. The defeat of the night before had transmuted into a cold, steady resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity. I spent the next 2 hours meticulously researching law firms on my phone, filtering for property law and free consultation. Attorney Lena Chang's name appeared repeatedly with excellent reviews. Her firm specialized in real estate disputes, an area that seemed perfectly suited to my predicament. By 8:30 a.m., I was standing outside her law offices, a modern glass and steel building that felt intimidatingly sleek. My hand clenched around the yellow envelope, its contents my only weapon. A quick check of my bank balance on my phone showed a meager 1,347. It was barely enough to cover a few nights in a decent hotel, let alone embark on a legal battle. The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I pushed it down. There was no going back. The receptionist, efficient and polite, led me to a quiet meeting room. A few minutes later, Lena Chang entered. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, professional ponytail, and her handshake was firm and confident. "Ms. Clark," she said, her voice calm and clear. "Thank you for coming in. Please tell me what brings you here today." I took a deep breath and the story poured out of me. I recounted the years of sacrifice, raising Michael alone after my husband Thomas passed, the grueling shifts, the sale of my mother's home to secure a down payment for Michael and Serena's house. I described my 4 years living with them, slowly morphing from a mother into an unpaid housekeeper, a cook, a babysitter for their future, imaginary children. Then came the devastating blow that changed locks, Serena's cruel dismissal, Michael's complicity, and the chilling finality of the words, nursing home. As I spoke, the humiliation burned anew, but also a righteous anger that strengthened my resolve. Lena listened intently, her expression unreadable, occasionally jotting down notes on a legal pad. Her gaze was steady, focused, never once wavering. When I finished, the silence in the room stretched for a moment, thick with the weight of my narrative. "I understand," she said finally, her voice empathetic yet professional. "Now, Ms. Clark, you mentioned some documents. Do you have the deed to the property?" I nodded, my hand already extending the yellow envelope. She took it, her fingers delicate yet precise as she extracted the papers. Her eyes scanned the document, moving swiftly through the legal clauses, then pausing at the ownership percentages. Her eyebrows, perfectly arched, rose ever so slightly. "This is very clear, Ms. Clark," Lena stated, looking up at me. "According to this deed, you, Eleanor Clark, own 70% of the property at address. Your son, Michael Clark, owns 30%. Their actions, changing the locks, preventing your access, and attempting to evict you are unequivocally illegal. They have no legal right to do so." A wave of relief, potent and almost overwhelming, washed over me. It was real. It wasn't just my hope. It was legal fact. "So," I began, my voice a little shaky, "can I just go home, demand to be let back in?" Lena leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You could, Ms. Clark. Legally, yes, but consider the reality. You would be returning to a hostile environment. They know what they did was wrong. They will likely try to make your life unbearable, to wear you down until you give up. They might accuse you of trespassing, call the police, create endless drama. It will be a battle every single day under their roof." She paused, letting that sink in. "My recommendation is different. We make them leave." Make them leave? The word startled me. The idea had never even occurred to me. "Yes," Lena confirmed, her eyes glinting with determination. "We file an emergency motion with the court to regain your access to the property immediately. Simultaneously, we file a motion for removal, citing hostile possession of your majority-owned property. This means we assert that their continued presence, given their illegal actions, constitutes a hostile takeover of your rightful home. The court would then compel them to vacate the premises while the dispute is being resolved. This gives you back your peace and your home without having to endure living with them during the legal process." My mind reeled, trying to grasp the implications. This wasn't just about getting my house back. It was about reversing the power dynamic entirely. But the cost? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, remembering my paltry bank balance. Lena's expression softened slightly. Legal battles, especially property disputes, can be expensive, Miss Clark. Depending on how long they fight, and they likely will, you could be looking at anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000, potentially more. My heart sank again. 1,347. It was a chasm. Lena seemed to anticipate my concern. However, she continued, you have significant equity in that house. Your 70% share represents approximately $245,000 based on current market values. You could easily secure a line of credit against that equity to cover legal fees. It would be a temporary loan, paid back once the house is either yours outright or sold and your equity realized. A line of credit. It made sense, a calculated risk, leveraging what was already mine to get what was rightfully mine. Lena's gaze grew serious. Ms. Clark, this will be a fight, a messy one. It will permanently damage, if not entirely sever, any remaining relationship you have with your son, Michael. Are you truly willing to go down this path? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain. I thought of Michael, my son, who had stood silently by as his wife announced my exile. I thought of the years I had poured into him, the sacrifices, the unconditional love, and I thought of his cold, empty gaze. My answer came without hesitation, firm and resolute. He already threw me away, Attorney Chang. He discarded me like yesterday's trash. At least this way I'll have a home. And maybe, just maybe, they'll learn that some things, some people are not to be trifled with. Looking at Lena Chang across the polished conference table, I felt a shift within me. The despair that had clung to me like a shroud began to recede, replaced by a nascent spark of defiance. I'm ready, I told her. My voice cleared and steady. I want to fight. Lena nodded, her expression serious yet affirming. She laid out a stack of forms, retainer agreements, authorizations, disclosures, each one representing a step forward, a commitment to this arduous journey. My hand, surprisingly steady, signed each document, the pen scratching a promise to myself. I handed over the original deed and the other pertinent papers, feeling the weight of them lift from my shoulders as they passed into her capable hands. Lena reviewed everything one last time. Good, we have everything we need, she announced. I'll have an emergency motion filed with the court this afternoon. With the evidence you've provided and the clear violation of your property rights, we should get a hearing scheduled within the next week or two, depending on the court's calendar. Her efficiency was both impressive and comforting. The best-case scenario, she explained, is that the judge sees the urgency and orders Michael and Serena to vacate the premises immediately, granting you full access. The worst case is that you gain legal access, but they are allowed to remain during the full legal dispute, which, as I warned, would make for an extremely hostile living situation. She fixed me with a stern gaze. Eleanor, I need you to understand something. This process will be hard. Michael and Serena will be furious. They will feel betrayed, even though they are the ones who committed this egregious act. They might try to rally other family members or friends against you, twisting the narrative. Are you prepared for that? Her words resonated, but instead of fear, they sparked a memory that hardened my resolve. Thanksgiving. Last year, I had spent hours preparing a feast, only for Michael and Serena to text me an hour before dinner, saying they were going out with friends. Don't wait up, Mom, Michael had written, followed by a smiley face emoji. I had eaten a solitary dinner, the silence of the house amplified by the festive occasion. They had left me alone then, too. This was no different. I'm prepared, Lena, I affirmed, my voice unwavering. They already showed me what they're capable of. I have nothing left to lose. Leaving Lena's office, a sense of purpose filled me. The first thing I did was call Evelyn. Evelyn had been my closest friend for over 40 years, a loyal, sensible woman with a heart of gold. She'd always had a keen intuition, often asking pointed questions about my living situation with Michael and Serena, sensing the underlying tension even when I tried to downplay it. Eleanor, where have you been? Evelyn's voice, usually so cheerful, was laced with concern. I've been worried sick. I drove by the house a few times and saw different cars, then your car was gone. Michael just said you went to stay with Laura. I swallowed hard, the lie burning in my throat. Laura's gone, Ev. She passed away last week. A gasp. Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Why didn't you call me? I, I just got back from the hospital. A lot has happened, Evelyn, more than you can imagine. I briefly recounted the horrifying events of my return home, the changed locks, Serena's chilling announcement, Michael's silent betrayal. Evelyn listened without interruption, her silence more comforting than any words could have been. When I finished, her voice was laced with indignation. The nerve, that utterly despicable girl, and Michael, how could he? Eleanor, you are not staying in some motel. My guest room is open. Pack your things. I'm coming to get you. An hour later, I was pulling into Evelyn's familiar driveway, the small box from the garage clutched in my lap. Evelyn rushed out, her arms open wide, enveloping me in a warm embrace. In her hug, in her unwavering support, I felt the first true comfort since Laura's passing, since the locked door. I moved into her spare room, the scent of lavender and old books, a welcome change from the sterile motel air. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of peace, knowing I wasn't alone. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. Mom, we need to talk. This doesn't have to be ugly. Please call me. The hypocrisy of his words made my stomach churn. Ugly! They had made it ugly. I looked at the message, a cold resolve settling over me. I wasn't going to call him. My lawyer would do my talking for me now. 4 days passed in a tense silence on my end, but a barrage of communication from Michael. He called 6 times, leaving 3 voicemails. The first was conciliatory, a plea for peace and understanding. The second was more urgent, a touch of desperation creeping into his tone. But the third voicemail, which came late on the 4th day, was laced with anger and thinly veiled threats. Mom, his voice rasped, clearly agitated. What are you doing? This is childish. You are going to regret this. Just come home. Serena and I are willing to talk. Don't push us, but don't blame me when you end up alone. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor. Alone? He had already ensured that, hadn't he? His words, meant to wound, merely underscored the depth of his cruelty and his twisted sense of victimhood. Evelyn, who had been listening from the kitchen, walked in, a tray of tea in her hand. He's still trying to make you feel guilty for his choices, isn't he? She observed, her eyes sympathetic. Michael is a grown man, Eleanor. He made his bed. Serena may be pulling the strings, but he's the one who let her. He's just as responsible. Her words resonated, reinforcing my own growing realization. Michael was not just an unwitting participant. He was a willing accomplice. Later that afternoon, Evelyn's old neighbor, Mrs. Green, stopped by. Mrs. Green, a tireless purveyor of neighborhood news, chatted for a while before her eyes twinkled with a juicy tidbit. Oh, and you know Michael and Serena? They're doing wonders with your old house. New windows, I hear. And that lovely siding they picked out last week is already being installed. They're really making it their own, aren't they? Seems so happy, like they won the lottery. A chill ran down my spine. New windows, new siding. They were investing, cementing their perceived ownership, absolutely convinced they had won, that I was simply gone, a minor inconvenience removed. I smiled politely at Mrs. Green, my heart hardening with each word. They had no idea what was coming. They were in for a very big surprise. If Eleanor's journey resonates with you, make sure to hit that like button, share her story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to follow every twist and turn of this incredible fight for justice. You won't want to miss what happens next. Day 6 brought with it a renewed wave of contact from Michael and Serena, but this time it was Serena who spearheaded the assault. My phone buzzed, and I saw her name flash across the screen. The message read, Mom, Michael is really upset. Can we meet for coffee? Just the 3 of us. Talk this through like family. We miss you. I read it aloud to Evelyn, who was sipping her morning tea. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Family? After what they did? That's a trap, Eleanor. She wants you to meet, probably to get you to sign something, anything that makes you relinquish your claim. Don't respond. Her wisdom was a comforting anchor in the storm. I listened, ignoring the message. Hours later, another text arrived from Serena. This one was more emotional, more manipulative. Please, Mom, think of Michael. He's so torn. Don't do this to him. He loves you. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. He was torn. He was distraught. He had silently watched as his wife, my daughter-in-law, had told me I was being sent to a nursing home, that my home was no longer mine. I deleted the message, my resolve solidifying further. There was no family left to talk to. There was only a legal battle ahead. On day 7, my phone rang. It was Lena Chang. "Eleanor," she began, her voice crisp. "Michael and Serena have retained counsel, and they've gone for the big guns, Attorney Robert Shaw." My stomach tightened. I knew the name. Robert Shaw was a formidable and expensive lawyer, known for his aggressive tactics and a knack for making his opponents' lives miserable. This confirmed they were taking this seriously, and they weren't backing down. Lena continued, "Shaw's initial response to our motion claims that you abandoned the property when you left to care for your sister, implying you forfeited your rights. He's also trying to frame our actions as a hostile takeover of your son's home, arguing that Michael's 30% ownership gives him substantial rights." "Abandon the property?" I exclaimed, my voice incredulous. "I was caring for my dying sister, and a hostile takeover? It's my house." "Exactly," Lena affirmed, her tone calm and reassuring. "We have the deed clearly stating your 70% ownership, proving it's your primary residence. We have Serena's texts, the voicemails from Michael, and even Mrs. Green's statement about their renovations, which indicates they believed they had exclusive possession, further discrediting their abandonment claim. We are on very solid ground legally." But then Lena's voice grew more serious. "However, Shaw is notorious for character assassination. He will try to paint you as a bitter, unstable woman, perhaps even suggest mental decline, given your age and recent grief. He'll try to discredit your claims and portray you as the unreasonable party. Are you ready for that kind of public scrutiny, Eleanor? For that kind of attack on your character?" For years, I had always tried to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, especially with Michael. I had bitten my tongue countless times, swallowed bitter words, all to maintain some semblance of family harmony. But those days were over. "Let him try, Lena," I said, my voice surprisingly strong. "The truth is the truth, no matter how much he tries to twist it. I have nothing to hide." "Excellent," Lena said, a note of approval in her voice. "Now I need you to do something for me. Compile every single financial contribution you have made to that household over the last 4 years. I'm talking about groceries, utilities, property taxes, home insurance, any repairs, even small ones. Anything that came out of your pocket for the benefit of that house or their living expenses." Over the next few days, the guest room at Evelyn's transformed into a makeshift war room. I meticulously gathered every checkbook register, every bank statement, every receipt I could find. It was a painstaking process, reliving every transaction, every expenditure. I logged the weekly grocery runs, the monthly utility payments that I had taken over to help out, the property tax bills that I had silently covered when Michael and Serena claimed they were short, the new water heater, the roof repair. Each entry was a small cut, a reminder of how much I had given, how much they had taken for granted. As the ledger grew, a shocking total began to emerge. $73,000. $73,000 in direct household contributions over just 4 years. And that was on top of the initial $48,000 I had given them for the down payment. $121,000. A staggering, almost unbelievable sum. Evelyn sat beside me, looking over my shoulder as I added the final tally. Her jaw dropped. "Eleanor," she gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief, $121,000? You were practically funding their entire lifestyle. They weren't just living with you, you were their personal aide." Her words hit home. It wasn't just a number on a page. It was a testament to my unspoken sacrifices, my blind devotion. "I thought I was helping," I whispered, the weight of the realization crushing me. "Helping is one thing, Eleanor," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "But this is different. This isn't a gift. This is compensation for housing, for services rendered, for a debt they owe you. Legally speaking, this is incredibly powerful evidence. It shows you were not just a resident, but a substantial financial contributor and, frankly, their benefactor. That night, sleep continued to elude me. The numbers swam before my eyes. The thought of losing, of having to sell the house and split the proceeds, still haunted me. What if Shaw succeeded? What if I truly ended up alone with no home, no family, and now my sister Laura gone? The profound loneliness was a cold, sharp knife to my heart. Evelyn found me pacing in the living room, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. She led me back to the couch and sat beside me, her hand warm on my arm. "Don't you dare give up, Eleanor," she said, her voice gentle yet unwavering. "You have the truth, and now you have a paper trail to prove it. And you have me. You will win this. They tried to set you on fire to keep themselves warm, but you're not going to let them." Her words, simple and profound, slowly began to rekindle the embers of my resolve, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The Tuesday morning of the hearing dawned cold and gray, a fitting backdrop for the emotional battle ahead. I had been awake since 4:30 a.m., the knot of nerves in my stomach too tight for any semblance of sleep. Every rustle of the wind outside Evelyn's guest room felt like a portent, every creak of the house a warning. Evelyn, bless her heart, was already up, a fresh pot of coffee brewing. She drove me to the courthouse, offering quiet reassurances and squeezing my hand periodically. The sheer enormity of what I was about to do, facing my son and his wife in a court of law, was almost unbearable. Yet the injustice they had inflicted fueled a steely resolve. Lena Chang was waiting for us outside courtroom 3B, looking impeccable in a sharp navy suit. She offered me a quiet, encouraging smile that did more to calm my frayed nerves than any words could have. "You're ready, Eleanor," she said simply. "We have the truth on our side." As we stepped into the courtroom, my gaze immediately sought them out. Michael and Serena were already seated at the defense table, accompanied by attorney Robert Shaw, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him. Michael, usually so casual in his attire, was dressed in an expensive dark suit, looking stiff and uncomfortable. Serena beside him wore a dress that screamed designer, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Her eyes, however, burned with a furious, undisguised hatred when they landed on me. Michael, in stark contrast, meticulously avoided my gaze. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his posture rigid. There was no hint of guilt or shame in his face, just a stubborn avoidance, as if, by not looking at me, he could erase my existence. A hush fell over the courtroom as Judge Clara Davies entered. She was an intelligent-looking woman in her early 60s, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression discerning and authoritative. She settled onto the bench, surveyed the room, and then signaled for the proceedings to begin. Lena rose, her voice clear and resonant. She began her opening statement, laying out the facts with precision. "Your Honor, we are here today because my client, Eleanor Clark, a 65-year-old widow, has been illegally locked out of her own home. The deed clearly states Ms. Clark is the primary owner of the property at address, holding a 70% share. Her son, Michael Clark, holds a 30% share. Despite this, Michael Clark and his wife, Serena Clark, have unlawfully changed the locks, preventing Ms. Clark from accessing her home following her return from caring for her dying sister. We are seeking an emergency order to regain Mrs. Clark's immediate access to her property and a motion for Michael and Serena Clark to vacate the premises until this property dispute can be fully resolved." Attorney Shaw, a man whose presence filled the room, then rose for his turn. His voice was smooth, confident, dripping with an almost theatrical disdain. "Your Honor," he began, "my clients, Michael and Serena Clark, contend that Ms. Eleanor Clark voluntarily left their home, where she resided as a guest, to stay with her ailing sister. She chose not to return for over a month. We contend that she is now attempting to weaponize a family dispute, to exercise undue control over her adult son's life, and to force her way back into a home that is no longer suitable for a live-in arrangement, especially as my clients plan to start a family. This is not a matter of illegal eviction. It is a desperate attempt by a parent to maintain control." Judge Davies listened impassively to both arguments, her gaze unwavering. She then looked towards our table. "Ms. Clark, please take the stand." My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my chest. I walked to the witness stand, my legs feeling strangely light. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and then sat down. My hands, clasped tightly in my lap, were surprisingly steady. Lena began her questioning, her voice gentle and encouraging. "Mr. Clark, could you please tell the court about the history of the property in question?" I took a deep breath, focusing on Lena's kind eyes. "Yes, I purchased the house in 2009 after my husband passed. It was my home. I worked very hard to pay off the mortgage, which I did over 13 years. 2 years ago, I added my son, Michael, to the deed as a joint owner. I did this out of love and trust to ensure things would be simpler for him in the future, to avoid probate. And during the 4 years Michael and Serena lived there, can you describe your financial contributions to the household?" Lena asked, holding up a thick binder. "Yes," I confirmed. "I contributed significantly. I bought most of the groceries, paid for utilities, covered property taxes at times, and handled various repairs and maintenance expenses. I thought I was helping them save money for their future." I nodded towards the exhibit. "My attorney has compiled a detailed accounting of these contributions." Lena presented the binder. "Exhibit A, Your Honor, a meticulously documented ledger of Ms. Clark's financial contributions to the household from January 2020 to March 2024. I continued. "Over those 4 years, my direct household contributions totaled approximately $73,000. That's in addition to the initial $48,000 I provided for the down payment when they moved in." As I spoke, the courtroom was silent. I saw Michael and Serena exchange quick, worried glances. Shaw's confident smirk wavered for a fraction of a second. The numbers, stark and undeniable, were a heavy weight in the room. Lena then guided me to recount the events of my return. "And what happened when you returned home from caring for your sister, Laura?" My voice, though still tinged with the pain of recollection, was clear. "I found the locks changed. Serena opened the door, with Michael standing behind her, silent. She informed me they had decided I would be moving into a nursing home. My son said nothing, just looked away. My belongings were packed into boxes in the garage." Lena paused, letting the raw emotion hang in the air. "So, Miss Clark, a 65-year-old woman, grieving the loss of her sister, returned to find herself locked out of her own home, with no warning, no discussion, and no place to go?" "That is correct," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. Judge Davies' expression, which had been neutral throughout, visibly hardened. Her gaze flickered to Michael and Serena, lingering for a moment. Then Attorney Shaw rose for cross-examination. His voice, once smooth, now held an edge of condescension. "Ms. Clark," he began, "isn't it true that you were an extremely hands-on mother-in-law, that you often interfered in Michael and Serena's private lives, making decisions about their home, their finances, their future without their consent, that you were, in essence, an overbearing and invasive presence, refusing them the privacy and independence that every young couple deserves?" Attorney Robert Shaw's voice, smooth and insidious, continued to probe, twisting every act of kindness into an accusation. "Isn't it true, Ms. Clark," he pressed, his tone dripping with implied criticism, "that you often commented on Michael and Serena's spending habits? That you frequently offered suggestions on how they should run their household, what they should eat, how they should save for the future?" He painted a picture of me as a meddling, intrusive figure, stripping away the benevolent intentions behind my actions, framing them as controlling. "I offered advice when asked, or when I saw they were struggling," I replied, my voice calm despite the rising frustration. "As any mother would." Shaw scoffed, a subtle, dismissive sound designed to undermine my credibility. "And your knocking habits, Miss Clark. Did you always knock before entering their private spaces? Or did you perhaps feel that because you owned a share of the property, their privacy was secondary to your access?" He implied a constant invasion, an unrelenting presence that eroded their personal space. "My clients felt," he stated, not asked, "that they were constantly invaded, constantly judged, that they had no space to truly build their own life without your oversight." "That's not true," I countered, my resolve stiffening. "I tried very hard to stay out of their way. I spent most of my time in my own room, reading, watching television." I gave them their privacy. Shaw's lip curled into a sneer. Your room, Ms. Clark? Or should we say their guest room that you'd been occupying for 4 years? He emphasized the word guest, attempting to diminish my ownership, to reduce me to a temporary visitor in my own home. Lena rose to object, but Shaw quickly cut her off, his voice booming. Your Honor, I am merely establishing the context of the living arrangement from my client's perspective. Judge Davies allowed him to continue, and despite Lena's sharp retorts and objections, Shaw managed to plant seeds of doubt. He tried to portray me as the difficult, overbearing mother who, by virtue of her financial contributions, had suffocated her son and his wife. By the end of his aggressive questioning, I felt utterly drained, a sense of weariness washing over me as I fought to keep my composure. Then, Lena rose for redirect. Her questions were brief, direct, and focused on reaffirming the indisputable facts. Mr. Clark, can you confirm again for the court that you are the primary owner of the property at address, holding a 70% share? Yes, I am, I stated clearly. And you purchased this property yourself, paying off the entire mortgage over 13 years? That is correct. And during the 4 years Michael and Serena Clark resided there, you continued to contribute financially to the upkeep of the home, including property taxes, utilities, and groceries, totaling over $70,000, in addition to the original down payment? Yes, I did. Alina paused, her gaze unwavering as she looked at me. When Michael and Serena Clark changed the locks and informed you that you were to be moved to a nursing home, did they offer you any assistance in finding alternative housing? Did they provide you with any financial support to secure a new place to live? My answer was quiet but firm. No, the only thing I received was a text message with the address of a storage unit for my belongings, along with a deadline to collect them. Lena nodded, her point made. Thank you, Ms. Clark. No further questions. I stepped down from the stand, my legs shaking slightly, a mix of exhaustion and indignation swirling within me. As I passed Michael's table, I caught his eye for a fleeting moment. His jaw was clenched, his face pale, but he still refused to meet my gaze. Serena, however, was glaring at me, her face a mask of barely suppressed fury. Judge Clara Davies announced a brief recess, and the courtroom emptied. In the quiet hallway, Lena placed a reassuring hand on my arm. You did very well, Eleanor, she said, her voice warm. Shaw is good at what he does, but the facts of ownership and your financial contributions are crystal clear. They can't argue with that. Her confidence was infectious, a much-needed balm to my frazzled nerves. When we returned, the courtroom was packed again, the air thick with anticipation. Judge Davies took her seat, her expression composed, holding a sheaf of papers. She wasted no time. This court has reviewed the evidence presented, she began, her voice cutting through the silence. It is undisputed that Ms. Eleanor Clark is the primary owner of the property located at address, holding a 70% ownership stake, as clearly evidenced by the deed. It is also undisputed that she purchased this property and paid off the mortgage in full. Her son, Michael Clark, holds a 30% share. She paused, her gaze sweeping over Michael and Serena. Therefore, Michael and Serena Clark had no legal authority whatsoever to change the locks, deny Ms. Clark access to her property, or attempt to exclude her from her own home. Their actions were a direct violation of Ms. Clark's property rights. The judge then referenced my financial contributions. Furthermore, the extensive documentation provided by Ms. Clark, detailing over $70,000 in direct household contributions over the past 4 years, clearly establishes her as a co-resident with significant financial investment, not merely a guest, as the defense suggests. This contribution, in addition to the $48,000 for the down payment, paints a clear picture of Ms. Clark's foundational role in this household. Judge Davies' voice grew stern. The actions of Michael and Serena Clark to lock out a 65-year-old woman who had just returned from caring for her dying sister with no warning and no provision for alternative housing are not only legally improper but, frankly, unconscionable. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Michael and Serena blanched, their faces losing all color. Shaw remained impassive, but even he seemed to shrink slightly. Therefore, Judge Davies continued, her voice firm and resolute, this court orders Michael and Serena Clark to immediately provide Eleanor Clark with new keys to the property, Furthermore, Michael and Serena Clark are hereby ordered to vacate the premises located at address within 30 days from today's date. Should they fail to comply, Ms. Clark has the right to file for a partition and forced sale of the property to realize her substantial equity. The gavel came down with a decisive thud, echoing through the stunned silence of the courtroom. The verdict was in. The sharp final strike of the gavel seemed to echo in the sudden, profound silence of the courtroom. I was overwhelmed, my mind struggling to fully grasp the magnitude of the victory. It was real. I had won. Lena squeezed my hand, a firm, congratulatory gesture, and behind me I heard Evelyn's quiet sobs of relief and joy. The silence, however, was abruptly shattered by Serena. She erupted, a furious, indignant cry tearing through the air. "This is insane! You can't just kick us out of our home!" Judge Davies, her gaze as sharp and cold as ice, fixed on Serena. "Ms. Clark," she stated, her voice devoid of any emotion, "this is Eleanor Clark's home. You have 30 days to vacate. That is the order of this court." Attorney Robert Shaw quickly intervened, placing a hand on Serena's arm, his face a mask of practiced calm, murmuring something to try and pacify her. But Serena was beyond reasoning. She spun around, her eyes blazing, and turned her fury on Michael. "Say something, Michael! Do something!" she shrieked, her voice high-pitched and desperate. Michael remained frozen, a deer caught in the headlights. His face was pale, his shoulders hunched. But then, as he slowly lifted his head, his eyes met mine. And in that moment, for the very first time since I'd returned to my locked-out home, I saw it. Guilt. Shame. The raw, undeniable recognition of what he had done. It was there, finally, in his eyes. Too little. Too late. The pain I had carried for weeks, for years, did not simply vanish, but a shift had occurred. His acknowledgement, however belated, brought no satisfaction, only a hollow ache. I rose from my seat, my head held high, and walked out of the courtroom. Evelyn was waiting, her face streaked with tears, and enveloped me in a tight hug. The bright sunshine outside, so different from the somber courtroom, felt like a blessing. Lena joined us, a triumphant smile on her face. "Congratulations, Eleanor," she said, her voice warm. "This is a significant win. Now we'll need to discuss your long-term plan for the house. You can either sell it and realize your equity, or you can buy out Michael's 30% share and have it entirely to yourself." The options, once unimaginable, now felt like open doors. As we walked towards Evelyn's car in the parking lot, I saw him. Michael, he was standing alone by his truck, looking lost, still pale. Serena and Shaw were nowhere in sight. He had waited. I felt a pull, a flicker of the old Eleanor, the mother who would always rush to her son's side. But the new Eleanor, the one forged in betrayal and injustice, held firm. I walked directly towards him, my steps resolute. He saw me coming, and his shoulders slumped. "Mom," he started, his voice thick with what sounded like remorse. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I cut him off, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Don't apologize, Michael. Not now, not after everything." The time for apologies passed the moment Serena told me I was going to a nursing home and you stood silently by. His face crumpled slightly. "But, Mom, you made your choices, Michael," I continued, my gaze unwavering. "You watched her tell me. You helped pack my things. You let her change the locks. You knew. And you did nothing." The words, though painful to speak, felt like stones finally lifted from my chest. "I didn't think it would go this far," he mumbled, his eyes darting away. "Serena, she convinced me." I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. It always comes back to Serena, doesn't it? It's never your fault. It's always someone else pulling your strings. You're a grown man, Michael. You made your decisions. Now you have to live with the consequences. I paused, letting my words sink in. "You have 30 days to find a new place to live." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a sudden raw hurt. "Did you ever actually love me, Mom?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, thick with accusation. "Or was I just some project to you, something you just invested in?" The question hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Incredulity warred with a searing anger. A project? I scoffed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Michael, I gave you everything. Every dollar, every hour, every dream I had for myself after your father died. I sacrificed my youth, my peace, my own future, so you could have one. My voice rose, yea, with emotion. I loved you with every fiber of my being. And this, I gestured vaguely at the empty parking lot, at the distance between us. This is what you threw away. His pain, I realized, was not for me or for what he had done. It was for himself, for the disruption to his comfortable life, for the consequences he now faced. You think you're being thrown away now? I asked, a bitter smile touching my lips. Imagine how it felt to be the one who was truly discarded years ago when you started seeing me as merely disposable. You never noticed me standing up for myself, Michael, because you were too busy trying to diminish me. I turned then, my gaze fixed on the future. I had said all I needed to say. There was nothing left between us to salvage, only ashes. I walked away, not looking back, towards Evelyn and the car, towards the new path that lay before me. It was time to rebuild my life, not dwell on what was irrevocably lost. 4 months later, the morning sun streamed through the bay window of my living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. This was my home again, truly mine. The walls, once a harsh gray, were now painted a soft, calming sage green. The sleek, minimalist art that Serena had chosen was gone, replaced by a gallery of cherished memories. A vibrant photo of Evelyn and me laughing, a tender portrait of Laura before her illness took hold, and a sepia-toned image of my mother, her youthful smile reminding me of where my strength came from. There were no pictures of Michael. Not yet, perhaps never. Their absence was not an act of malice, but a simple truth. My life had moved beyond his orbit. The weeks immediately following the judge's verdict had been a tense, silent standoff. Michael and Serena, humiliated and furious, mostly avoided me. I'd spent that first week methodically reclaiming my space, painstakingly documenting the unauthorized renovations they'd made, the new windows, the siding, the bizarre backsplash in the kitchen, all expenses they would eventually be responsible for. I also took inventory of my belongings, noting with a pang of sadness a chipped antique vase and a few missing books. It was a sterile, transactional process, devoid of any genuine human interaction. Then, on day 28, just 2 days before their mandated departure, there was a tentative knock on my bedroom door. I opened it to find Michael standing there. He looked utterly exhausted, older than his years, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, a stark contrast to the defiant man in court. He held out a large envelope. "Mom," and he began, his voice hoarse. I have something for you." I took the envelope, my heart giving a small, hollow lurch. Inside were legal documents. I quickly scanned them. They were fully signed and notarized. A quitclaim deed, transferring his 30% ownership of the house back to me. 100% mine. The gesture was utterly unexpected. Michael then launched into a halting, broken apology. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "About everything, I was so wrong. Serena. Her pregnancy claim, it was a lie. She wasn't pregnant. She said it would solidify our claim on the house, make the judge see us as a growing family who needed the space." He finally met my eyes, and the shame I had glimpsed in the courtroom was now raw and exposed. "I don't deserve my share, Mom. I never did. This whole house, it was always yours." A profound, hollow sadness settled over me, eclipsing any lingering anger. The relationship, the one I had poured my entire life into, was broken beyond repair. No anger, just a weary acceptance of the irreversible damage. I simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his words, of the truth of his confession. He didn't wait for my response. He turned and walked away, the sound of his truck starting, then fading into the distance. He was moving to a rental property near Serena's parents, starting over, as he put it. My house was finally and completely mine. The immediate relief of having my home entirely to myself was palpable. I changed the locks, of course. That strange nursery Serena had planned for a non-existent child was repainted and transformed into a cozy library filled with the books from my storage unit, their familiar spines a comforting presence. Serena's garish kitchen backsplash was painstakingly removed and replaced with classic white subway tile, a small but significant act of reclaiming my aesthetic. My peace, my life, once defined by caring for others, was now blossoming with quiet joys. The neglected rose bushes in the garden were thriving under my care, their petals bursting with color. I started a small vegetable garden, finding immense satisfaction in nurturing something new from the earth. Evelyn remained my rock, our regular dinners a cherished tradition, her presence feeling more like family than any blood relative ever had. I even joined a book club, making new friends in Carol and Diana, women who saw me, truly saw me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. Laura had passed away peacefully 6 weeks prior, her suffering finally at an end. Though her loss left an undeniable void, the grief was softer now, tinged with relief for her release. I'd started attending a watercolor class, finding a meditative calm in mixing colors and translating the world onto paper. It was a way of seeing things fresh, as my instructor would say, a beautiful metaphor for my own life. But it wasn't just about personal pleasure. My painful experience had ignited a new purpose within me. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, offering comfort and support to women navigating their own challenges. There, I met Maria, a woman in her late 60s whose story chilled me to the bone. She, too, had lost her home, coerced into signing over her deed to her daughter and son-in-law, who then promptly kicked her out. Her face, etched with despair, mirrored the reflection I had seen in that motel mirror months ago. "I know a good lawyer, Maria," I told her, my voice gentle, offering her Lena Chang's card. "She fights for people like us." True to her word, Lena took Maria's case pro bono, and within weeks, Maria had won an emergency motion for temporary housing, a glimmer of hope in her dark world. Witnessing Maria's small victory, I realized the profound truth. My suffering was not in vain. My experience, harrowing as it had been, could serve a purpose. I found myself contemplating becoming a volunteer advocate for seniors exploited by their own families, using my hard-won knowledge and strength to guide others through the darkness I had faced. It was a path that felt right, a way to transform my pain into power. One sunny afternoon, as I was pruning my thriving rose bushes, the doorbell chimed. I answered it to find a young woman in a sharp business suit, holding a clipboard. "Eleanor Clark?" she asked, a practiced smile on her face. "Hi, I'm Natalie from Riverside Realty. I noticed your beautiful home. Just wanted to see if you'd given any thought to selling." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, and shook my head firmly. "I'm not selling, Natalie. I said, my voice strong and unwavering. "This is my home." Later that evening, as dusk settled, my doorbell rang again. This time it was Michael. He stood on the porch alone, looking less haggard than he had 4 months ago, but still carrying a quiet solemnity. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant, "I've been in therapy, a lot of therapy, and I had to come and tell you. I'm starting to understand how much I took from you, how much I really stole." His eyes, for the first time, held a genuine, self-reflective remorse. I looked at him, not with the old anger, nor the recent hollow sadness, but with a quiet understanding. He had started his own journey, his own painful reckoning. It was a long road for him, but he had taken the first step. "Come in, Michael," I said, a soft sigh escaping me. "I'm making tea. We can talk. Not tonight, not all of it, but tomorrow. Coffee?" He nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. There were no promises, no expectations of instant forgiveness or a return to the past. That past was gone. But standing there in my home, my sanctuary, I realized I was whole. My life was not ending. It was just beginning, beautiful and entirely my own.